Hello, I'm Paul Baldacini. Get a lot of questions about why do I paint flowers, and I must be inspired by flowers, and I must be so inspired by nature, and those kind of questions seem reasonable considering that the subject of everything I've painted for the past almost 10 years has been flowers. And yes, it would sound very cliche if I were to say I'm inspired by nature and I'm inspired by flowers. I suppose I am, but it's not really the whole picture. It's not. It really doesn't capture the essence of how I got to this point. That's a long story, way too long to thread in this video. Uh, I paint flowers because I'm interested in flowers. I'm interested in uh, many aspects of the science of how they grow and why they grow. I'm interested in the patterns of light that are cast on their petals. I'm interested in the mathematics of their repeating shapes. Those are the things that I'm interested in, and that's why I paint these flowers. As far as inspiration, um, my inspiration comes from a very different place. What has inspired me over the years has been uh, examining and appreciating other artists' work, and this goes way back for me, but particularly in high school. When I made my first trip to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and I saw my first glimpse of old masters paintings, something that I've been really interested in and studied outside of the normal method of structured education. I've taken it upon myself to learn as much as I can about the old masters and how they paint. And I was particularly struck by a very large painting by Peter Paul Rubens. Uh, I don't know, Cyrus offering a severed head to the Queen Tamiris, I think is the name of it. It's a gigantic painting. It's about 12 feet long and 4 feet high. It's a remarkable work, and I was always awed by that painting, particularly the little dog in the lower right. But that spurred me on at that young age when I had just learned how to oil paint. It was a realistic painting. I knew I wanted to paint realistically. There was something about that painting and other old master paintings in that museum that held me in awe. In fact, to this day, it still does. But later later on, as I got into college and then finally into my professional career, I kept studying by reading about the old masters, Rubens, and in particular the Mannerists, which is a really interesting part of the Renaissance that begins around 1520 or so and continues on for 80 or 100 or so years into the early 1600s, the 17th century. I'd say that the Mannerist probably was kicked off in large part by Titian and his contemporaries, and ended around the time of Rubens' his death as we moved into the Rococo period after that. But that whole period of art, that 100 or so years, has held me in awe, even to this day. When I was finally able to travel extensively and afford to be able to do it, I did a burst of traveling in the early 80s through the mid 80s to actually see these paintings. I went to Europe many times. I went to the studio of Rubens, and I went to the studio of Rembrandt, and I went to Italy to see Titians and Bronzinos, and I went to the Netherlands and the Low Country to see the works of Rubens' contemporaries, Bartholomeus Spranger and Jacob Jordaens, and there was something about those works. I don't know what it is, but there was something about their approach to painting, a very structured approach to painting, that I thought was going to be a method that I could use to emulate in my own work. What exactly is that? In short, it was a drawing, perhaps, or a sketch on a toned canvas, an underpainting, which was either fully or partially realized, and then a series of applications of transparent and semi-transparent, and then opaque paint layers built up on top of that, as a method of painting that was expedient. That made sense from the point of view of the materials that were available at the time, to use them in a proper way in terms of what dries first and what doesn't. And then the actual pigments themselves, although they were of course all hand ground and prepared, there was mediums that we used in the case of oil that allowed these painters to create these very powerful, beautiful works that have survived for 500 years. And what was it about that allows us, even to this day, for those paintings to survive and for us to enjoy them and view them, particularly in the case of Rubens? Nobody knows the medium he used, but there are ideas of what he used. And he was a most remarkable painter. Peter Paul Rubens, he lived to be about 63, 64 years old. And in his professional painting career, which spanned about 40 years, he completed a little over 1,400 major works, which is just a staggering amount of work. Not to mention the fact that he was also an ambassador, a consultant to kings and business people. He was an incredible businessman, and his studio, to turn out work at the pace they did, he employed assistants that specialized in different aspects of painting, and it was it just held my interest to the point where I had to go see as much of Rubens's work as I could, and I did. I went to Antwerp, to his studio. I saw his work, retrospective of his work in Brussels, which allowed me to see not only finished paintings, but his concept work, his studies, and some of his underpaintings, which were never completed with overpaintings, and they survive to this day. And it was just absolutely beautiful, brilliant. The principles that and techniques that he used in his painting, and we'll leave aside for a moment the brilliant design and composition of his works, and just talk about the technical aspects, because that's what really interests me. I tried to glean as much knowledge as I could about Rubens's technique and his contemporaries, and exactly how they did what they did, because there isn't anything left of their secret recipes. They're long lost. But we have an idea of how he worked and what his mediums were to successfully create the paintings the way he created them. That, to this day, has brought me on a quest, a search of knowledge, and a fine-tuning of that body of knowledge to discover the technique that worked for so many of these artists, to nail down design and compositional problems ahead of time, so they could solely devote their time to working out the nuances of color and color mixing. That's exactly what I do today in my own paintings. I've come up with my own structured approach to painting. I've written about it. I've had some articles published about it. I've actually written a book, which I don't know if that will ever be published, but it works for me. It allows me to work in successive stages and solve a series of problems. I'm a very organized person, So it allows me to solve a certain set of problems within the overall task of completing a major piece of work. So how do I do that? I do it the way they did it. I nail down my design and composition first. I transfer it to my panel. I create a completed underpainting, a monochrome underpainting, and then I apply a transparent and semi-transparent paints over that in successive layers in varying degrees of opacity till the painting is done, and then it's varnished. And that's pretty much exactly what they did and how they did it. The difference is they had a very limited set of palettes, mostly earth colors and a handful of some bright colors. I won't get into the technical aspects or the physical property of those pigments, but today we have a huge range of modern pigments that I've explored to develop my own palette, which is a combination of old pigments and new pigments. So I'm able to bring that all to bear on how I do what I do. So to end this rather long discussion, I just want to say that it's not so much inspiration, in my opinion, that makes their work or all artists' work, perhaps, but certainly my work successful. I find it to be more perspiration. It's more hard work. It's just hard work and doing the same thing over and over again until you get really, really good at it. So it's maybe 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. That's, to me, I think Woody Allen said that. So I don't want to take that as my own. I believe Woody Allen said that about what it takes to be successful. But I think it's a very true thing, and it's what has been my kind of guiding principle for all this great many years. That's about it. Thank you very much for sitting through this and listening to it. And you have a very safe and happy 2021.